I was sitting at the Nashville airport sipping my overpriced latte and staring at my phone as it exploded with notifications. 47 missed calls. 63 unread messages. Every single one from my family, from vendors, from people I thought I could trust. My brother Dylan's name flashed across the screen for the 48th time, and I smiled as I sent it straight to voicemail. Behind me, the gate agent announced final boarding for Flight 247 to Honolulu. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up my boarding pass, not from fear, but from the intoxicating rush of freedom. Just 72 hours ago, I had been the dutiful daughter, the supportive sister, the one who sacrificed everything to make everyone else happy. Now I was the woman who watched her brother's engagement party crumble into chaos from 30,000 feet in the air, and I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. If you want to hear how I went from being my family's doormat to the woman who walked away from their disaster with my head held high, stay with me. And if this story resonates with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories of people who finally chose themselves, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your sanity and your family's expectations. Now let me take you back to where this all began. 3 months earlier, my phone rang while I was in the middle of coordinating a charity gala for the Nashville Arts Council. The moment I saw Dylan's name on the screen, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the one that came from years of being the family's backup plan, the safety net, the one who was always expected to show up and fix everything. I answered anyway because that's what I always did. Dylan's voice was bright with excitement, almost childlike. "Gina, I have the most amazing news. Emma and I are getting engaged, and I want you to plan our engagement party. It's going to be huge, at least 150 people. I need it to be perfect, something that really shows everyone who we are as a couple. You're the best at this in your family, so of course you're my first choice." My heart should have soared. My older brother, the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, was asking me for help. This was my chance to finally prove my worth, to show them that my career as a cultural event organizer wasn't just a hobby, but a real profession. I should have seen the red flags waving frantically in front of my face, but I was too desperate for their approval, too hungry for the validation I'd been chasing my entire life. I told Dylan I'd be honored, that I'd make it the most memorable engagement party Nashville had ever seen. What I didn't tell him was that I was already drowning in projects, that my savings account was looking pretty thin after helping Mom and Dad with their home repairs last month, or that Emma Vaughn had made it crystal clear at every family dinner that she thought my job was cute but not a real career. I pushed all of that aside because this was family, and family came first. At least that's what Mom had drilled into my head since I was old enough to understand the concept of sacrifice. The next morning, I dove headfirst into planning mode. I contacted every vendor I'd worked with over my 6 years in the event planning business. Carlos Ortiz, who managed the most stunning rooftop venue in Nashville, agreed to give me his premium space despite having another event scheduled. I promised him this would be worth moving things around. Teresa Morgan, whose catering company specialized in elevated Southern comfort food, started creating a custom menu that would blend elegance with Nashville authenticity. Brian Walsh, an incredibly talented decorator I'd collaborated with on several high-profile events, began sketching out designs for an installation that would transform the rooftop into something magical. I threw myself into every detail with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I spent hours researching Emma's Pinterest boards, trying to decode her aesthetic preferences. I reached out to her twice to schedule planning meetings, but she was always too busy. Dylan assured me she trusted my judgment completely, which should have been my second red flag, but I interpreted it as confidence in my abilities. How naive I was. As the weeks passed, the costs started adding up. The flower arch Emma had casually mentioned wanting during one brief phone call. $3,000. The custom laser-cut place cards with each guest's name in an elegant script, $500. The bourbon tasting station featuring rare selections, another $2,000. Every time I presented Dylan with the budget updates, he'd wave his hand dismissively and say, "Just make it happen, Gina. Money isn't an issue. We want this to be spectacular." What he didn't say was that he expected me to front most of these costs and get reimbursed later. What he didn't mention was that later kept getting pushed back. By the time we were 3 weeks out from the party, I had invested over $8,000 of my own money into this event. My savings account was nearly empty, but I told myself it would be worth it. I told myself that when they saw what I'd created, when they witnessed how I'd transformed their vague ideas into something extraordinary, they'd finally see me as more than just the family's helper. They'd see me as a professional, as someone worthy of respect. My cousin Vanessa had been my sounding board through all of this or so, I thought. We'd grown up together, shared secrets, supported each other through breakups and career changes. When I confided in her about my anxiety over the budget and Dylan's increasingly vague communication, she'd hug me and say, "You're doing amazing, Gina. They're so lucky to have you." I didn't realize she was already positioning herself firmly in Emma's camp, already calculating how to distance herself from me to secure her place in their glamorous circle. 2 weeks before the party, Mom called. Her voice had that particular tone, the one that made it clear this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "Gina, honey, I need to talk to you about the party." Now, don't take this the wrong way, but Emma mentioned to me that she's concerned about some of the choices you're making. She feels like maybe you're not quite understanding the sophistication level they're going for. "I'm sure you're doing your best, but maybe you could check in with her more frequently." I felt like I'd been slapped. I'd been checking in, constantly sending updates and photos and mock-ups, only to be met with brief responses or complete silence. I'd been working myself to exhaustion, skipping meals, staying up until 2 in the morning, tweaking seating charts and coordinating with vendors, and now I was being told I wasn't sophisticated enough. I swallowed the hurt and assured Mom I'd reach out to Emma immediately. Emma finally agreed to meet me for coffee 3 days later. She arrived 20 minutes late, didn't apologize, and spent the first 10 minutes on her phone before finally looking at the presentation I'd prepared. I watched her face as she flipped through the photos and plans, searching for any sign of approval or excitement. What I saw instead was boredom tinged with disdain. "This is very nice, Gina," she said in a tone that made it clear she thought it was anything but nice. "But I think you're missing the mark on the vibe we're going for. Dylan and I want something more elevated, more exclusive. This feels a bit too Nashville touristy, if you know what I mean. Can you make it more cosmopolitan? More Manhattan than Music City?" I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. The entire concept had been built around Nashville, around creating something authentic to this city we all called home. But I nodded and smiled and promised I'd make adjustments. I went home that night and cried for the first time in months, then dried my tears and started making changes, even though it meant eating additional costs for materials and decorations I'd already ordered. Dad called a week before the party. "Gina, your mother and I have been talking, and we think it would be really meaningful if you could contribute to Dylan and Emma's honeymoon fund. They're planning this incredible trip to the Maldives, but it's quite expensive. We thought maybe you could chip in $3,000. It would mean so much to your brother, and it's what family does for each other." $3,000. On top of the $8,000 I'd already spent. On top of the countless hours of labor I'd donated. On top of the emotional energy I'd poured into making their celebration perfect. I felt something crack inside me, a tiny fissure in the foundation of the person I'd always been. But I was so conditioned to comply, so trained to sacrifice, that I heard myself saying I'd think about it, which we both knew meant yes. The days leading up to the party were a blur of final confirmations and last-minute adjustments. Carlos called to review the timeline. Teresa sent me photos of the menu test run. Brian stopped by to show me the final mock-up of the floral installation. Everyone was excited, everyone was ready, and I was running on caffeine and sheer determination, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in my stomach. On Friday afternoon, 2 days before the party, I was in my tiny office in East Nashville, reviewing the final details one more time. My phone sat on my desk and I kept glancing at it, waiting for a message from Dylan or Emma with last-minute requests or hopefully a simple thank you for all my work. When it finally buzzed, I grabbed it immediately, eager for any acknowledgement. The message was from Dylan. My hand started shaking before I even finished reading it. "Gina, Emma and I have been talking, and we've decided you don't really fit the vibe we're trying to create for the party. We appreciate everything you've done, but we're going to take things from here. You don't need to come to the event. We'll handle the vendors." I read it 3 times, certain I must be misunderstanding. Don't really fit the vibe. You don't need to come to the event. After everything I'd sacrificed, after the money I'd spent, after the countless hours of work, I was being uninvited to a party I had planned, funded, and built from the ground up. I wasn't sophisticated enough for their celebration. I wasn't good enough to be seen at their event. My vision blurred, but not with tears. With rage. With a cold, clarifying fury that cut through years of conditioning and people-pleasing and desperate attempts to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. I sat there in my office, surrounded by binders full of plans and receipts and contracts with my name on them, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. Before I could even process what I was feeling, my phone rang. Vanessa. I answered it, hoping for support, for someone to tell me this was insane, that I deserved better. Instead, I got another betrayal. Gina, I'm so sorry, but Emma told me what's happening, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She explained that you just don't really understand the aesthetic they're going for, and she thinks it's better if you step back. Please don't be upset with her. She's just trying to make sure everything is perfect for her special day. You understand, right? I understood perfectly. I understood that I had been played, used, and discarded. I understood that my family had never seen me as an equal, only as a resource to be exploited. I understood that Vanessa had chosen her allegiance, and it wasn't to the person she'd called her best friend for 28 years. I hung up without responding and immediately called my best friend Tracy Fisher. Tracy was a freelance journalist with a sharp mind and zero tolerance for manipulation. We'd met at a networking event 3 years ago and bonded over our shared experiences of being underestimated women in competitive fields. If anyone would tell me the truth, it was Tracy. I could barely get the words out through my anger. Tracy listened in silence, and when I finished, she said exactly what I needed to hear. Gina, you've been a doormat for these people your entire life, and they've finally shown you exactly how much respect they have for you, which is none. But here's the thing, you hold all the cards. Every contract is in your name. Every vendor relationship is yours. You can walk away right now, and there's not a damn thing they can do about it. Something clicked into place. She was right. I had the power. I had always had the power, but I'd been too busy trying to earn their love to realize I didn't need it. What I needed was my self-respect, my financial security, and my freedom from their toxic expectations. I spent the next hour methodically emailing every single vendor. The messages were professional, courteous, and final. Due to unforeseen circumstances, I am stepping away from the Marshall Vaughn engagement party. Dylan Marshall will be taking over all coordination and communication. Please direct all questions to him at the following email and phone number. Thank you for your professionalism and partnership. Carlos responded within minutes. Gina, are you sure about this? You're the backbone of this event. Dylan doesn't know any of the details, and we're 2 days out. This could be a disaster. I know, I typed back. That's no longer my problem. Teresa's response was more emotional. We trust you, Gina. If you're walking away, there must be a good reason. Just know that without your guidance on the menu adjustments and guest preferences, we'll have to go with our standard service. I hope everything is okay. It will be, I assured her, and I meant it. Brian called me directly, concern evident in his voice. Gina, what's going on? Do you need help with something? This doesn't sound like you. I'm finally being myself, I told him. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing me. After I sent the last email, I opened a new browser tab and booked a flight to Honolulu, departing Saturday morning at 10. The engagement party was scheduled for Saturday evening at 7. I'd be somewhere over the Pacific Ocean when it all fell apart, and the thought filled me with a savage satisfaction I didn't know I was capable of feeling. That evening, I called Mom, still holding on to a shred of hope that she'd be on my side. I explained what Dylan had done, how I'd been treated, how much money I'd spent. I waited for her to be outraged on my behalf, to defend me, to acknowledge the injustice. Instead, she sighed heavily. Gina, why do you always have to make things so difficult? Your brother is under a lot of stress with the wedding planning, and Emma comes from a very particular background. You need to be more understanding. Can't you just apologize and smooth things over? What will people think if they hear our family is fighting right before this important event? Think about how this reflects on all of us. I felt something inside me die. The last remnant of the little girl who desperately wanted her mother's approval simply ceased to exist. I see, I said quietly. And what about how Dylan and Emma's behavior reflects on them? What about how treating your daughter like hired help and then firing her reflects on you as a parent? Mom gasped. Don't you dare speak to me that way. I raised you better than this. You're being selfish and dramatic. Family means sacrifice, Gina. Family means putting others first. No, Mom, I said, my voice steady and cold. Family means respect. Family means not exploiting the people who love you. But you've never seen it that way, have you? Dylan has always been your priority, and I've always been your backup plan. I'm done being anyone's backup plan. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. 20 minutes later, Dad called. I knew what was coming. Gina, your mother is very upset, he started. But beyond that, I need to talk to you about Dylan's honeymoon. Your mother and I discussed it, and we really think you should contribute the $3,000 we mentioned. It's your duty as his sister, and it would mean a lot to the family unity if you supported this important milestone in his life. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. Let me get this straight, Dad. Dylan just uninvited me from a party I planned and paid for because I don't fit their vibe, and now you want me to give them $3,000 more for a vacation. Do you hear how insane that sounds? Gina, don't be childish. This isn't about the party. This is about being a good sister and showing you support your brother's happiness. Money shouldn't come between family. You're right, I said. It shouldn't. But you've all made it very clear that I'm only valuable to this family when I'm giving you my time, my money, and my energy. The moment I stop being useful, I stop being wanted. I won't be contributing to the honeymoon, Dad. I won't be contributing anything anymore. He started to argue, but I ended the call. I sat in my apartment looking around at the life I'd built despite my family's constant demands, and I felt lighter than I had in years. I was done. I was finally completely done. That night I posted one photo on my private Instagram visible only to my close friends. It was a screenshot of a flight confirmation to Hawaii with the caption, "Choosing myself for once." Tracy liked it immediately and commented, "About damn time." Several other friends responded with supportive messages. Vanessa notably didn't interact with the post at all. The next morning, I woke up at dawn and went for a run along the Cumberland River. The sunrise over Nashville was beautiful, and I felt like I was seeing the city with new eyes. I was about to become someone different, someone who didn't apologize for existing, someone who didn't shrink herself to make others comfortable. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I spent the rest of Friday packing for Hawaii, ignoring the increasingly frantic messages from Dylan. By Friday evening, he'd left me 6 voicemails, each one more panicked than the last. The first one was dismissive. "Gina, stop being dramatic and call me back. We need to discuss the vendor situation." The last one was desperate. "Gina, please. I don't know what I'm doing. The vendors won't listen to me. Everything is falling apart. I need your help." I didn't call back. I didn't owe him my help. I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. I dressed carefully in comfortable travel clothes, double-checked my suitcase, and called a rideshare to the airport. As the car wound through Nashville's streets toward the airport, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. Whatever happened next, I was free. I was finally genuinely free. I checked in for my flight, went through security, and found a quiet spot near my gate. I ordered a ridiculously expensive latte and a breakfast sandwich, treating myself to the kind of indulgence I usually denied myself because I was too busy saving money to bail out my family. As I settled into my seat and opened my phone, I saw that the messages had reached critical mass. Dylan had sent 43 messages. Mom had called 18 times. Dad had left 7 voicemails. Even Emma had texted, which was rich considering she was the one who'd started this whole mess. Vanessa had sent a long, rambling message about how I was ruining Dylan's special day and how disappointed she was in me. I read that one twice, marveling at the audacity. I was about to put my phone in airplane mode when Tracy sent me a message. "I just posted the article. It's already getting traction. Stand your ground and don't you dare feel guilty. Call me when you land." Tracy had been working on a piece for a popular online publication that focused on toxic family dynamics and emotional labor. She'd asked my permission days ago to write about my situation without using names or identifying details, framing it as a case study about the exploitation of women in service industries by their own families. I'd agreed, not thinking much would come of it. Clearly, I'd underestimated Tracy's reach and writing ability. I pulled up the article on my phone. The headline read, "The event planner who was told she didn't fit the vibe at her own brother's party she planned and paid for." The piece was brilliant, detailing the dynamics of a family that had consistently undervalued one member's contributions while taking advantage of her professional skills and financial resources. Tracy had changed enough details to protect my identity, but anyone who knew the situation would recognize it immediately. The comment section was already filling up with responses. Hundreds of people sharing their own stories of being used by family members, of having their professional skills dismissed, of being expected to work for free because it was for family. My story had touched a nerve and the support was overwhelming. I'm so glad she walked away. Family doesn't mean being a doormat. I went through something similar with my sister's wedding. Why do families think creative professionals should work for free? The entitlement is unreal. They literally uninvited her from a party she organized. I hope it was a disaster. I felt tears pricking my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of validation, of recognition, of finally being seen and understood. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. What had been done to me was genuinely wrong, and people I'd never met understood that better than my own family ever had. The gate agent announced boarding for my flight to Honolulu. I stood up, grabbed my carry-on, and got in line. As I handed over my boarding pass, my phone buzzed one last time. It was Dylan calling again. I looked at his name on the screen, felt absolutely nothing, and sent it to voicemail. Then I turned off my phone completely, slipped it into my bag, and walked down the jet bridge toward my new life. The plane took off at 10:15, right on schedule. As Nashville disappeared beneath the clouds, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders that I didn't even know I'd been carrying. I was 30,000 feet in the air, flying toward a week of peace and self-discovery, while back on the ground my brother's engagement party was about to implode in spectacular fashion. And I wasn't there to fix it, to smooth things over, to sacrifice myself one more time for people who'd never appreciated the sacrifice. I ordered a glass of wine from the flight attendant, something I never did because it felt too extravagant, and settled into my seat with a book I'd been meaning to read for months. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I had nothing to do, nowhere to be, and no one making demands on my time or energy. It was glorious. Meanwhile, back in Nashville, chaos was unfolding exactly as I'd known it would. I didn't learn the details until later, but Tracy kept me updated with texts that I read when the plane landed in Honolulu, and the picture she painted was one of beautiful, absolute disaster. Carlos had arrived at the venue early Saturday morning to begin setup, only to find that the floor plan Gina had created was nowhere to be found, and Dylan had no idea where tables were supposed to go. Half the flower arrangements were missing because Dylan had never confirmed the final order. The elaborate arch that was supposed to be the centerpiece of the space had been replaced with cheap balloon arrangements because Emma had changed her mind at the last minute, and Dylan had found the cheapest alternative he could on short notice. Teresa and her catering team showed up with the carefully curated menu Gina had designed, only to be told by Emma that she'd decided she wanted something completely different. Cold sandwiches instead of the hot BBQ sliders. No peach cobbler, despite it being specifically chosen because Dylan had mentioned it was his favorite. The vegetarian options were completely wrong, leaving several guests with nothing to eat. Social media posts from attendees started appearing almost immediately, complaining about the food quality and lack of options. Brian discovered that the custom laser-cut place cards were missing. Dylan had no idea what he was talking about. The sophisticated lighting design Gina had arranged was replaced with harsh overhead lights because no one knew how to work the dimmer system. The rooftop, which should have been transformed into an elegant, intimate space, looked like a high school dance thrown together by people who had no idea what they were doing. Guests started arriving at 7 dressed in their finest, expecting the sophisticated affair that had been promised. What they found was chaos barely held together by overwhelmed vendors and a couple who clearly had no control over their own event. By 7:30, people were already leaving. By 8, Emma and Dylan were having a screaming match in front of everyone. One of the guests captured the moment on video. "You said you could handle this," Emma shrieked, her composure completely shattered. "You said you didn't need her. Look at this disaster. This is supposed to be our engagement party, and it looks like a cheap corporate mixer." "You're the one who wanted her gone," Dylan shouted back, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "You're the one who kept saying she wasn't sophisticated enough." "Well, congratulations, this is what sophistication looks like when you fire the person who actually knew what she was doing." The video went viral within hours. Someone had recognized them and connected the dots to Tracy's article. Suddenly, my story wasn't anonymous anymore. People knew exactly who the entitled couple was, and the internet's judgment was swift and merciless. Hashtags started trending. "Justice for Gina." "Event planners deserve respect." "Family exploitation exposed." I learned all of this while sitting on Waikiki Beach. My phone finally turned back on to a flood of messages. But instead of the angry, demanding messages from my family, I found hundreds of supportive messages from friends, colleagues, and total strangers who'd read Tracy's article and tracked down my social media. Event planning companies were reaching out with job offers. Vendors I'd worked with were publicly praising my professionalism. People were offering to hire me for their own events at premium rates. And yes, there were messages from my family, but the tone had changed dramatically. Mom's messages went from angry to panicked to pleading. Dylan's messages were a mix of rage and desperation. Dad's single text simply said, "Call your mother." Even Emma had reached out, though. Her message was characteristically self-centered. "Gina, I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything and made us look terrible. This is so unprofessional." I read them all while sipping a Mai Tai and watching the sunset paint the Hawaiian sky in shades of orange and pink. I felt no guilt, no regret, no desire to fix what they'd broken. They'd made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. For once, those consequences didn't include me sacrificing myself to make their lives easier. Vanessa sent the most pathetic message of all. Gina, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how bad things were. I should have supported you. Can we talk? I responded with a single sentence. You chose your side, Vanessa. I hope it was worth it. I spent the next 5 days in Hawaii doing absolutely nothing productive, and it was the best decision I'd ever made. I walked along the beach every morning. I took a sunset cruise. I visited a Buddhist temple and spent an afternoon in meditation, finally processing all the years of hurt and resentment I'd buried beneath my people-pleasing exterior. I journaled, writing page after page about who I'd been and who I wanted to become. Tracy called me every day, updating me on the fallout and making sure I was okay. The article had been picked up by several major publications. People were sharing their own stories of family exploitation and professional devaluation. My inbox was overflowing with opportunities. Companies wanted me to speak about setting boundaries. Event planning organizations wanted to feature me in their professional development programs. Several high-profile clients had reached out directly, having heard about my work through the vendors who'd publicly defended me. But the most significant message came from the Nashville Music Festival Foundation. They were organizing a major charity gala and wanted me to be the lead event coordinator. The pay was excellent, the exposure would be incredible, and the message was clear: they valued my work and my expertise. They didn't see me as someone who didn't fit the vibe. They saw me as a consummate professional who deserved respect and fair compensation. I accepted the position via email from a beachside cafe in Maui, sipping an iced coffee and feeling like I'd finally stepped into the life I was meant to live. When I returned to Nashville 5 days later, tanned and rested and fundamentally changed, I was ready to face whatever came next. The first thing I did was meet with Carlos, Teresa, and Brian. They'd all reached out during the disaster, and we'd maintained communication throughout. We met at a coffee shop in East Nashville, and the moment I walked in, they all stood and applauded. I actually laughed, embarrassed by the attention, but also deeply moved. Carlos hugged me. Gina, that was the most epic professional move I've ever witnessed. I've been in this business for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone stand up for themselves like that. Teresa nodded enthusiastically. You taught everyone in this industry a valuable lesson. Our work matters. Our time matters. We don't owe anyone free labor just because we're related to them. Brian grinned. Plus, watching that engagement party fall apart was honestly the most entertainment I've had in months. I know that sounds mean, but they had it coming. We spent 2 hours discussing the charity gala. They were all excited to work with me again, and this time, the project felt different. There was no guilt, no family obligation, no expectation that I'd sacrifice myself for someone else's vision. This was professional, collaborative, and energizing in a way my brother's engagement party had never been. I also made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. The charity gala would be held at the same venue where Dylan and Emma's engagement party had been such a disaster. Carlos was initially hesitant, worried it might be too painful or feel like I was rubbing their faces in it. But I explained my reasoning. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was reclaiming a space where I'd been humiliated and dismissed. I was proving that I could create something beautiful and successful in the exact place where I'd been told I wasn't good enough. Over the next 6 weeks, we worked tirelessly on the gala. But this time the work felt different. I wasn't drowning in stress or anxiety. I wasn't worried about pleasing difficult people or living up to impossible standards. I was creating something I believed in with a team that respected my expertise for an organization that valued my contributions. Every decision I made was met with trust and encouragement rather than criticism and dismissal. The guest list for the gala included several prominent figures in Nashville's music and business communities. The cause was important, supporting arts education in underfunded schools, which aligned perfectly with my values. The event had meaning beyond just being impressive. It had purpose. I did not invite my family. I didn't send them announcements. I didn't ask for their input or their attendance. For the first time in my life, I created something significant without including them, and the freedom of that choice was intoxicating. This was mine, and they had no claim to it. Of course, they found out anyway. Tracy's article about the gala mentioned me by name, and several local publications picked up the story, fascinated by the narrative of the event planner who'd been fired by her own family and then went on to coordinate one of Nashville's most anticipated charity events of the year. The publicity was overwhelming in the best way possible. 3 days before the gala, Mom called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this conversation needed to happen. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it, lacking the usual commanding tone. Gina, I've been wanting to talk to you. I've seen the articles about your gala, and I'm very proud of what you've accomplished. Your father and I were wondering if we could attend. We'd like to support you. I took a deep breath. Mom, you had 28 years to support me. You had countless opportunities to value my work and respect my choices. But every single time you chose Dylan. You chose his comfort over my well-being. You asked me to sacrifice repeatedly without ever acknowledging what it cost me. So no, you can't attend my gala. This isn't about punishment. This is about boundaries. You taught me that family means sacrifice, but you only applied that lesson to me, never to Dylan. I'm done sacrificing for people who don't appreciate the sacrifice. There was a long silence. Then quietly she said, I think I understand. I'm sorry, Gina. I'm sorry I didn't see what I was doing to you. I felt a softening in my chest, but not enough to change my mind. Maybe someday we can rebuild our relationship, Mom. But it will have to be on equal terms with mutual respect. Right now I need to focus on myself and my career. I ended the call feeling oddly peaceful. I'd said what I needed to say without cruelty, but also without backing down. That was growth. Dylan tried a different approach. He sent me a long email the day before the gala. It was full of apologies and justifications, acknowledging that he'd treated me badly, but also trying to explain away his behavior. The engagement to Emma had been called off, he wrote. They'd both realized they were incompatible, and the disastrous party had just been the final straw in a relationship that had been built on superficial attraction rather than genuine connection. He claimed he'd learned from the experience, that he understood now how much I'd done for him over the years. He wanted to make amends, to rebuild our relationship, to show me that he could be a better brother. The email was well written and seemed sincere, but I noticed something crucial. He never once offered to pay me back the $8,000 I'd spent on his party. He never acknowledged the financial exploitation, only the emotional hurt. I replied with a single paragraph. Dylan, I appreciate your apology, and I'm glad you've gained some self-awareness. However, trust is rebuilt through actions, not words. If you're serious about making amends, you can start by reimbursing me for the money I spent on your engagement party. Until then, I need space to focus on my own life and career. I wish you well. He didn't respond. I wasn't surprised. People like Dylan were good at apologizing when it cost them nothing, but accountability that required actual sacrifice was another matter entirely. The night of the charity gala arrived, and I'd never been more nervous or more excited in my life. I wore a dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion, something elegant and confident that made me feel like the professional I was. Tracy arrived early to help with any last-minute issues and to document the event for a follow-up article. The rooftop had been transformed into something magical. Brian's lighting design cast everything in a warm, sophisticated glow. The floral arrangements were stunning, elevated, yet approachable. Teresa's catering team had created a menu that celebrated Southern cuisine while incorporating elegant, modern touches. The live band was perfectly positioned, filling the space with music that was lively enough to create energy but subtle enough to allow conversation. Guests began arriving at 7, and I greeted each one with genuine warmth. These were people who'd chosen to support this cause, who'd paid significant ticket prices to be here, and who appreciated the work that had gone into creating this experience. Several people recognized me from the articles and went out of their way to congratulate me on my resilience and professionalism. Carlos pulled me aside at one point, his eyes shining with pride. Gina, this is perfect. This is what you're capable of when you're working with people who respect you. Never forget that. By 9 o'clock, the event was in full swing, and I finally allowed myself to relax and enjoy what I'd created. I stood at the edge of the rooftop, looking out over Nashville's skyline, feeling the warm spring breeze and listening to the sounds of laughter and music behind me. This was success. This was validation. This was proof that I'd been right to walk away, right to choose myself, right to demand better treatment. Tracy found me and handed me a glass of champagne. To the woman who finally stopped apologizing for being brilliant, she said, and we clinked glasses. The event raised twice the expected amount for arts education. The foundation's director gave a speech thanking me specifically for my vision and dedication. Several guests approached me afterward with business cards and requests for future collaboration. By the end of the night, I had enough potential projects lined up to keep me busy for the next year, all at rates that actually reflected the value of my work. As I helped oversee the cleanup, I checked my phone and saw that my family had been following the event on social media. The foundation had been posting photos and updates throughout the night, and Nashville media outlets had covered it extensively. My family couldn't avoid seeing my success, couldn't pretend I was still the struggling little sister who needed their guidance and approval. Mom had sent a text. "It was beautiful, Gina. You've always been talented. I'm sorry it took me so long to really see it." Dad's message was more practical. "Your mother and I would like to take you to dinner to discuss things. Would you be open to that?" Vanessa sent a long emotional message about how proud she was and how much she regretted not standing by me. She wanted to get coffee and catch up, wanted to explain herself, wanted another chance. I read them all and felt nothing but a distant, detached calm. Maybe someday I'd be ready for those conversations. Maybe someday I'd be willing to open the door to reconciliation, at least partially. But not today. Today was about celebrating my achievement, my independence, my hard-won self-respect. I replied to each message with a variation of the same response. "Thank you for reaching out. I need time to process everything that's happened. I'll contact you when I'm ready to talk." The following week, Tracy's follow-up article was published. She'd titled it, "From Doormat to Dream Career, How One Event Planner's Bold Choice Inspired Thousands." The piece detailed the success of the charity gala and included interviews with attendees, vendors, and the foundation's leadership, all praising my professionalism and creativity. But the most impactful part of the article was the final section where Tracy had compiled dozens of messages from readers who'd been inspired by my story to set their own boundaries, demand fair compensation, and walk away from toxic situations. My story had resonated because it was so common. Countless people, especially women, were expected to provide free labor for family members to sacrifice their own needs and financial security to accept disrespect and dismissal because family always came first. By walking away, by choosing myself, by succeeding so visibly, I'd given others permission to do the same. The article ended with a quote from me that Tracy had recorded during our conversation on the beach in Hawaii. "I spent most of my life believing that my worth was determined by how much I could give other people, how useful I could be, how much I could sacrifice without complaining. It took being utterly dismissed and disrespected for me to realize that my worth is inherent. I don't have to earn love from people who should love me unconditionally. I don't have to prove my value to people who will never see it. I just have to see it in myself." That quote was shared thousands of times across social media. It became a sort of rallying cry for people who were tired of being taken advantage of, tired of putting everyone else first, tired of shrinking themselves to make others comfortable. 6 months after the gala, I was sitting in my new office. I'd left my old workspace in East Nashville and upgraded to a larger, more professional space in the Gulch. My business had tripled. I'd hired 2 assistants. I had a waiting list of clients. I was making more money than I'd ever imagined possible, not because I was working harder, but because I was finally charging what I was worth and refusing to accept less. I'd seen my family exactly twice in those 6 months. Once, at a brief, awkward coffee meeting with Mom and Dad, where we had a superficial conversation about neutral topics and carefully avoided anything substantial. And once when I ran into Dylan at a restaurant. We'd exchanged polite greetings, but the warmth was gone, the easy familiarity erased by what had happened. I wasn't sad about it. I was realistic. Some relationships can't be repaired, and some relationships aren't worth repairing. My family had shown me exactly who they were, and I'd chosen to believe them. I'd also chosen to move forward without them, and that choice had been the best decision I'd ever made. Tracy stopped by my office on a Friday afternoon bringing coffee and pastries from my favorite bakery. We sat in the comfortable chairs by the window, looking out over the Nashville skyline, and she asked me a question she'd been wanting to ask for months. "Do you regret it? Walking away from the engagement party, blowing up your relationship with your family, making such a public stand?" I thought about it carefully before answering. I regret that it had to happen that way. I regret that my family's love was always conditional, always tied to my willingness to sacrifice myself. I regret the years I spent trying to earn something I should have been given freely. But do I regret choosing myself, setting boundaries, walking away from people who treated me badly? Not for a single second. Tracy smiled. "Good. Because you've inspired more people than you realize. Including me. I quit accepting those exploitative freelance contracts. I'm charging double now, and people are paying it because my work is worth it. You taught me that. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping our coffee and watching the city below. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, desperate for approval, willing to sacrifice anything for the illusion of family unity. That woman felt like a stranger now. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her value, someone who refused to settle for less than she deserved. My phone buzzed with a notification. A potential client wanted to schedule a consultation for their anniversary party. The budget they mentioned was substantial, and their message was respectful and enthusiastic. I replied quickly, professional and confident, already thinking about the possibilities. This was my life now. This was what happened when you stopped waiting for permission to take up space, when you stopped apologizing for being good at what you do, when you finally courageously chose yourself. Looking back at everything that happened, here's what I learned. Your worth is not determined by how much you sacrifice or how useful you are to other people. Your talent and expertise deserve compensation and respect, whether you're working for strangers or family. Love that requires you to diminish yourself isn't love, it's manipulation. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away from people who will never see your value, no matter how hard you try to prove it. I didn't need my family's approval anymore. I had something better. I had my own respect. And that, I discovered, was worth more than all the conditional love and grudging acknowledgement in the world. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between staying in a toxic relationship and choosing your own peace? Have you ever walked away from family or friends who consistently undervalued you? What helped you finally make that decision? Drop your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, if you've been that person who gives and gives until there's nothing left, hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and share this with someone who needs to hear that choosing themselves isn't selfish, it's survival. Your story matters, and I'd love to hear it.